This press conference is the last for my agencies. You would have noted, and I didn't see any write-up in the press. So we're not going out on any sour note, but I didn't see any write-up in the press that for the first time, I don't even recall whether it's in recent memory or at all, that you were being given end-of-year press conferences by, for example, the governor of the Bank of Guyana. Can you imagine that? The governor of the Bank of Guyana giving you an end-of-year press conference. NIS gave you an end-of-year press conference. The Guyana Revenue Authority gave you an end-of-year press conference. I believe the Statistical Bureau also gave you one. And culminating in the Ministry of Finance giving you an end-of-year press conference. And we should at least get a little kudos for the fact that this ministry and this government has been walking the walk when it comes to transparency and accountability. And
They put all together.
no, I indicated to them that we must have all of these end-of-year press conferences finished before the 19th of December so that I could get mine out. And so I know you got material until next year based on what you've been given from these various agencies. But I just want to tickle you on that. I mean, so many things coming out to you, it appears as if, it's just out of the ordinary. But strictly speaking, I don't recall when last you had a end-of-year press conference being given by the governor and so on. It is to indicate the level of autonomy that we are allowing these agencies to have in their day-to-day management. The minister is responsible for policy. That's all. I'm responsible for elucidating the policy to these agencies, and these agencies are responsible for executing the policies. So, Mr. Jordan, on the Minister of Finance, doesn't have to be vindictive to anybody. I don't have a vindictive bone in my mind. I'd rather be a lover, not a fighter. And so if the GRA has work to do, I have explained to them from day one, as you well know, that I'm a hands-off person. The GRA must do its work, NIS must do its work, Statistical Bureau must do its work, and I will hold everybody accountable when the work is not done. Because you can't indicate that you had interference from the government. So I know this is a sea change that is going on in this country. People expect to hear from the minister or hear what the minister will tell them and so on. Not in this government, and certainly not this particular minister. That will not be happening. I've made my thing very, very clear. As a matter of fact, I got a demand notice too. Right? I got a demand notice somewhere around, I believe it's July, I think, in respect of income for last year. I thought I had paid all my taxes, and this was no fault of mine. I'm a PAYE payer, and somebody must have, so on. So I got a demand notice, queried it, and realized that I short paid some taxes. I went and I paid my taxes. So all this thing about you getting demand notice when budget was going on. I don't know that the GRA Commissioner General has to wait on whether an occasion before he determines whether you should get a demand notice or not. But that's just by way of clearing the deck in terms of some of these things that get in the press and seem to get more press than all this enlightened autonomy and independence that you seem to be getting. Okay, this morning I just want to complete this circle of events by indicating some of the highlights for my ministry over the past year. Of course, a major highlight for us was the fact that we were able to bring out the first full year budget for this coalition government as early as January last year, and have it passed by, I believe it was February the 23rd, on the morning of February 23rd, when the appropriation bill was passed. I think at that time it was one of the earliest budgets. Of course, you had budgets that were earlier than those, but it was one of the earliest budgets, and coming at a time when a mere, I believe, 4 or 5 months after the previous one was submitted. I think this is a tribute to the quality of the staff that we have developed over time, and the management capability, and also the all-round leadership and direction of this ministry. as such that you can produce two budgets, two full-year budgets, by the way. And the 2015 budget, I keep hearing people saying it was a truncated budget. It was not. In accordance with the Constitution, there's no such thing. The 2015 budget was a full-year budget for 2015. And it didn't just serve only the last 5 months. It served the entire year, because all that was used up between August and January of last year was also included in the appropriation bill for 2015. So please stop using any notion of truncated budget. There's no such thing as a truncated budget, right? There's a full, the Constitution requires us to do a full budget for every year. And that was done for 2015, but it was done late. And 2016, if you want to call that now, the real full year, but that came out all year. And I think so we are done quite well. And to crown that achievement, as if that were not enough, we went one step further. And this year brought out the budget for 2017 in 2016, and I'll have it passed by Wednesday. The Appropriation Act will be passed, and that will clear the way for us to start on January 1. Okay, New Year's Day, people are still working on New Year's Day, so we start on January 1. That will be the first time since back in the 70s, as I had quoted in my budget speech, that this would have happened. And I'm thinking everyone should be happy about this, particularly the private sector, because they will have an opportunity to put their activities in place and determine how government will spend. We won't have this lumpy spending that we've had in the past when budgets particularly came out late and then had a mad rush to spend money in the last 2 months. Such a rush, by the way, that there were times when the books supposedly closed on December 31st, but were open repeatedly in January of the next year to accommodate spending out of votes for previous years. Okay, this might have been hidden, but now it's on the open. It used to happen, okay? That even though the books were supposedly closed on December 31st, they were open from time to time in January to accommodate spending from the previous year's votes. This does not happen anymore. Books are closed December 31st, that's it. There's no reopening of books to put expenditure being done in the new year recorded back in the previous year. You know, I mean, all kinds of things happened back then that weren't investigated, but who knows? You get them drips and drabs now, and you could do your further investigation as to whether the Minister of Finance is telling fables or not. He couldn't be, because he has been in this citadel longer than most. So he must be aware where the skeletons are. So that will help us out, and hopefully it will help us with our own programming, which has also suffered from the lumpiness of expenditure releases and so on. Not least of which has been the public sector investment program. Now I am hoping, and more than just hoping, that we can now get a full year of implementation of our public sector investment program, which had suffered during this year and did not take the benefit of an early budget. But I think hopefully all around there are going to be systems changes, maybe even personnel changes. There are going to be planning units that are going to be established in many of these agencies, particularly the big agencies, and there's going to be interagency coordination that would better facilitate execution. A lot of pressure had come down on the tender board. Now, tender board is in the news almost every day these days, and that's because there's more openness and there's more need for accountability at the tender board. I don't need to go through what perceptions had been raised about the tender board and its activities and so on. Suffice to say that now we are trying to bring back some respectability to that board. Everything is being done in the open. There are some ways to go, but now they have a public procurement commission that will be overseeing them. There is also the bid protest committee that is there and functioning. They have done, I think, at least two um, reports already. Okay, they are going to be looking at setting up a debarment committee and so on. So they're working. They have an IDB technical assistant that is looking at streamlining their operations, helping them to prepare procurement plans, and developing a proper website so that they can put all information and so on, and develop an information system that that can be used. Uh, Also, I didn't know whether you realize, but we have been able during the year to produce for the first time, I understand from my technical people, for the first time, produce the half-year report before the close of business, before Parliament went into recess. Okay, that's a signal achievement. Again, it allows people to understand what the developments at the half year and what projections we are taking. These reports are extremely important for people, businesses and so on, that have to do their planning, helping shape their own planning horizon. You know, there's no sense a half year report being made available in October. You know, it's not, unless it's for the history and the universities, it wouldn't be of much use to businessmen and others who rely on timely and accurate information and statistics coming from government to help them do their own planning. So I thought that was also a very signal achievement for this ministry. Also, we were able to produce for the first time again, if you remembered, the public debt report, reporting on the public debt of the country for the last 5 years. And here again, as I said, these weren't required under any law. That wasn't required under any law, but we thought again, given our own manifesto promises of improving accountability, that this was a particular report that should be in the public domain at all times. And just prior to that release of that report, it would have seen why it had to be in the public domain at all times, because people were playing fast and loose with our debt statistics. You know, in fact, only I believe last week sometime, a member of the opposition called me to say that a report was quoted in Trinidad that our external debt was 30 billion US dollars or some strange figure like that. I don't know where that came from. I didn't see the report myself, but they were saying there was a report quoted in some newspaper or online news in Trinidad that our debt was 30 billion. I think they must have made a mistake, or I don't know whether they were quoting Guyana dollars. But we won't get anywhere. Nobody's debt in the entire Caribbean is 30 billion US dollars. I mean, our debt is roughly 1.6 billion, comprising about 1.2 thereabouts of external and about 400 million thereabouts of local. And that would have been in the report at the mid-year. It was not all hard work in that sense. We also had some soft during the year. We have our own issues here with staffing and staff training and so on. I won't worry about it. That's an issue that's taken up throughout the country. But we have started to do things slightly different here. And so I want to recall our first Health Week, Health and Financial Week, that was implemented in June of this year, where for a whole week we exposed our staff to exports, health. We had a health and fitness walk. I think it started out with a health and fitness walk this Sunday, and we had throughout the week, we had various experts coming in to talk about various aspects of health. And I think we had at one point women's health by themselves, men's health by themselves, and then we also had an expert come in and speak about financial planning. We will continue this in the coming year and for as long as I'm here at least. We also were pleased to open our Force gymnasium. We do have a gym right here, right? Concerning the health again. So we have a gym here, which I'm happy to report is used quite a bit. Quite a bit. I don't know whether other ministries have, but I know 1 or 2 ministries are trying to emulate what we have done, and I will be happy to give them the benefit of our experience, essentially. But I think it's important for staff to remain healthy in a very stressful environment, and the Ministry of Finance is a very stressful environment. You have to make certain people get paid on time, new members coming on, and so on, ensure that they get paid. People who work in the hinterland and so forth, you have to make certain that they're comfortable and so on. So it's extremely stressful against odds that got to do with slow internet or no internet, and so on. So we are dealing with those. I just want to also indicate that we also had a very good report from the IMF early in the year under the Article 4 consultation. We got a pretty good report. There were some areas that they flagged that we are going to look at. Of course, one of the areas that flag, of course, is the rate of growth of expenditure in certain areas. And there was also a bit of a concern of the mismatch between current expenditure and capital, which means that current expenditure is growing far faster than capital expenditure. And that was a concern any economist and financial will have, because it is capital that will generate the wealth down the road to secure your capacity to undertake current expenditure. So we are looking at that and hoping to correct that somewhat in 2017. We expect another Article 4 mission in February of next year, when hopefully we can also have similar kudos for managing the economy, managing the exchange rate, managing inflation, managing the deficit. These things are taken for granted, but they require a concerted effort all around, not only in the ministry. We are the guiders of it, but we also have to keep our hands on the pulse. Bank of Guyana would have been able to indicate to you what efforts have been made to make certain our reserves remain well secured, and that our exchange rate does not deteriorate by anything much. Finally, at the level of, while we're dealing with international agencies, we also are responsible for dealing with a number of other international agencies, among which are the CARICOM Development Fund. And as you know, in this area, we signed, did we sign the earlier amendment this year? Yes, so we had 2 engagements with the CARICOM Development Fund this year. Earlier, we signed an adjustment to the loan that was given to the Perico, to do the Perico Ruby Bagdam project. Very good project. We've now been completed. And about last week, I think it was, I also signed another loan for $10.67 million to do villages of Buxton, BV Triumph, Moko Arcadia, and Itiko. All villages that have been neglected in the past, but which have rich history of farming and both subsistence and export potential. I should also indicate that Guyana has put up a candidate to be the chairman of the CARICOM Development Fund. There are 2 candidates, I believe, who are in the running at the moment. Our candidate is Dr. Sherwin Williams, who up until recently was the executive director for the Caribbean on the Inter-American Development Bank Board. But prior to that, has extensive service at the International Monetary Fund, over 30 years in the International Monetary Fund. And there's another candidate from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I think, Yes, I can't remember his name now, but it's important to remember the name Dr. Sharon Williams. He's our candidate, and hopefully we can get him elected as the chairman. The chairman lasts for 2 years? 2 years. 2 years, and oversees the activities of the Caribbean Development Fund via the board. We also have relationship with the United Kingdom Caribbean Infrastructure Partnership Fund, also known as UK CIF. We are expecting, was it 57 million? 53.2 million pounds, and it's quoted in pound sterling for a very good reason for the time being. And this money we are hoping to have targeted, as said in the budget speech, to critical interventions of the Linden Mabura Road, the bridge, Kupukari, the bridge at Kupukari, and the Stabrook Waterfront Development Project. All right. Only last week I met with the representative of the UK and the CDB, which is overseeing this project, to convince them about the efficacy and validity of these projects and what they mean for Guyana. So the next step, I believe, is that they are going to engage in some terms of reference to do the technical assistance to get this design these projects. It is they're quite exciting. I think the Ministry of Public Infrastructure might have already indicated to you, or they probably will indicate when they do their end of year press conference, what the structures would look like when once completed. So once we could get that stretch of road finished and get that bridge over, we'll be on our way for the first time, you know, on making a reality this road from Georgetown to Lethem, you know, which is the last leg on a true Pan-American highway. And then, of course, Inter-American Development Bank is our biggest lender in Guyana. They have been around since 1976, I believe. And for this year, finally, the coalition government has been able to put out there its own agenda. Now that we are trying to create fiscal space so that we could accommodate these loans that we are taking from, among others, the Inter-American Development Bank. And over the last 2 months, we have had 4 loans approved for us, all of which will be signed sometime next month.
Most likely February.
Well, early February, when I pay a visit to Washington on other business. These loans are enhancing national quality infrastructure for diversification and trade promotion. That's for $9 million US, and it, among other things, it will support the establishment of facilities for metrology testing, purchase of laboratory equipment for the Bureau of Standards, Ministry of Public Health and Agriculture, and prepare a national export and investment promotion strategy. So those are some of the things that loan will do. Then we had support to improve maternal and child health. This is a project, this is $8 million that has been approved to, among other things, rehabilitate the C.C. Nicholson Hospital and maternity waiting home, to procure equipment for health facilities at Georgetown Hospital, C.C. Nicholson Hospital, the Georgetown Maternity Waiting Home, and also for some institutional strengthening. Then we had the Sustainable Agriculture Development Project. This is for $15 million, US $15 million, and it will provide for the construction and rehabilitation of centers in the regions 9 and 10. It will help undertake an agricultural census, and it will do a pilot project in meat processing. And then the 4th loan that we had from approved by the IDB is for support for the criminal justice system, $8 million US. And among the activities it will seek to pursue, alternative sentencing interventions, strengthening of probation services, design and implementation of restorative justice, training of judges and magistrates in the use of alternative sentence and pretrial detention, and law reform. Okay? And in addition to those loans, we have had 2 technical assistance approved for us. The first was way back in March when 442,000 roughly US dollars was approved for institutional strengthening of Guyana's national statistics system. So this will help this will help the Statistical Bureau undertake 2 critical data collection in, as I mentioned it in my wrapping up too, the consumer price index. As you know, as I said, what we use now is what is called an all Georgetown. We use Georgetown, collection of data in Georgetown as a proxy for the entire country. Well, this assistance will allow us to do regional indices and allow information to come out more frequently and in a timely manner, which is important for, again, for planning at all levels, not least of which the business level. It will also help us to shape policy as it relates to interventions in the regions, so we get a better appreciation for prices and so on that take place in those areas. And the second one is, for the first time in a very long time, I believe not since the 70s, 1970s, that actually an unemployment survey will be undertaken. I don't believe, all that we have had before are proxies, proxies as to how to get to unemployment. But this one will allow a full-fledged unemployment survey to take place. And so you'll get to appreciate and understand all kinds of different aspects of unemployment, regional unemployment. Georgetown unemployment is not Region 10's unemployment and so on. And so again, it will help shape planning. You'll want to really begin to query, how are we doing planning in the absence of data of this kind? Proxies are fine, but to be using proxies for that length of time, not knowing truly what is the real unemployment rate, or what is the regional employment rate, what is the real CPI, Consumer Price Index, and so on. So by 2018, they're going to start next year, and by 2018, we should have some indication as to where this is concerned. And of course, the IDB also approved a technical assistance for 745,000 US dollars to modernize valuation, the valuation division in Guyana, and to improve management and real property tax assessment. As you know, the database for valuation in this country is extremely outdated, and our valuation department is extremely challenged, both staffing-wise, equipment-wise, system-wise, and so forth. So this technical assistance will go a far way to alleviating some of the shortages and the problems that it won't eliminate all, but it will go a far way to doing that. And then, of course, another main multilateral donor to Guyana is the Caribbean Development Bank. A couple of days ago, they have indicated they're going to make available an envelope of 194 million US dollars over the period 2017 to 2021 for Guyana. And this, of course, includes the part that has to do with the UK SIF that I earlier indicated. And they have also approved some technical assistance for us. One is to do a market demand study to inform whether it is feasible to reestablish a development bank in Guyana. Okay, so that will get underway early next year. All right, as you know, we had Guy Bank, but that bank was closed when the former government came into power. And also, they have also approved a technical assistance for institutional strengthening and to develop capacity for development planning in Guyana. We talked about this. This should get underway next year also. There were some hiccups in finding quality people to do this. Amazingly, and in the Caribbean, you're hard pressed to find quality people who can still do development planning. So it's not only in Guyana we are challenged, but other places. And in fact, right now we have sent out the ads for CPO, and right now we are challenged to find quality people who can do a development plan, who can prepare development plan, medium and long-term development plans, and so on. But we're working on it, and hopefully we're trying to tap into diaspora to see whether the skills exist there, and we will continue. Hopefully, we have a candidate identified. Hopefully, we can find the means to pay him so that he can come on board early next year. As you know, we had the Islamic Development Bank here. We became members of the Islamic Development Bank in May of this year, and we hosted a high-level mission in October this year. We are continuing our engagement with the Islamic Development Bank to follow through on some promises that they had made to us, and also some projects that we had put to them. I think you're going to have to bear with us a little bit, because this is a new engagement with a head office that is not anywhere near us here. Unlike they say the IDB, they have a head office here that we can interface with. World Bank also has one. CDB is across the pond, so we could always think. They're till down in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and time changes and language changes and so on and so forth. And then, of course, this is a new thing called Islamic financing, which is pretty new to us, certainly. So we're going to have we're going to have a learning curve arrangement here before we could actually get any financing out of this bank. But at least we're making the first steps and so on. Of course, we are also, World Bank, they have also increased our envelope over the next 5 years, in spite of the fact that we have been graduated from lower middle income to upper middle income status. That is useful. And an important project that will come on stream, well, at least will be negotiated and signed next year, has to do with the national payment system, where we're seeking to, among other things, de-emphasize cash in the economy. And I think for many of you this cannot come sooner, because of as you would have seen what has happened over the last year or so, but particularly over the last quarter of this year, with all this so too many cash transactions in Guyana. So this project will help us put in the platform that will in place that will help us see other aspects of cash management other than just actual cash passing itself. So that will be important. World Bank is also, of course, in the education sector. They are finishing off a project at the University of Guyana, and they should start a project to do with financing of secondary schools. And of course, the other major multilateral agency for us is the IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development, and they have approved a loan for us in December of this year for almost 11 million. No, the loan is 8 million, and there's a grant component for a project called Hinterland Environmentally Sustainable Agricultural Development in Guyana. So this project will be dealing with the hinterland area, and it's meant to support agri-development activities in regions 1 and 9, including value chains, establishment of investment fund, and the execution of a state of food agriculture study in region 1. Right? So as you can see, the spread of the loans is across the country, and that's not just concentrated in 1 or 2 regions. Finally, of course, we have the 2 critical European Union Development Fund and the European Union Investment Bank. If I take the last one first, the European Union Investment Bank came to Guyana earlier this year That was the first time we re-engaged with them for about 20 years. So it was a very exciting visit, and the possibilities seem endless. We have put together 3 project proposals which we have submitted to them. One aimed at private sector development, another aimed at infrastructure development, and a third aimed at generating clean and renewable energy. Okay, the private sector development one has to do with the port, development of ports, the channel, getting the channel cleared and so on, and maybe having a public-private mix in terms of managing that development. So we are going to continue to engage the European Investment Bank to get this project going. It's very important for our longevity in trade because, you know, these small boats and so on will become dinosaurian soon. The thing now is to go big, and our channel and the bar down there is a hindrance to greater trade. And of course, this year, we've been able to get substantial release of funding from the European Development Fund. I think it's about a month or 2 ago, I went to Dominican Republic, where I brought back a check for 24.4 million euros. As you know, this check was held back in 2014 as a result of certain developments that took place there that are well known. And by the time this government got into power, we had to face substantial additions to qualifying conditions. But we have successfully passed those. And we were praised profusely by the Director General there prior to issuing the check for us. We were praised for our developments in areas in transparency and accountability, and also to meeting the various criteria that had been outlined. And earlier the year, we had got a check for 9.7 million euros in respect of the sea and river defense. This check was handed to me at the Marriott Hotel, if you remember well. So we did quite well. We expect an additional 34 million euros on the 11th EDF, mostly for sea and river defense programs. So essentially, that is on the multilateral side. We do have some bilateral. We are also responsible for a couple of bilaterals. I think you are familiar. In case of India, we earlier this year I signed a loan for the Ogle Bypass road. That has been going a bit slowly. Again, it's the communication between here and India via the local High Commission, and in terms of the steps that one has to contract Indian contractor to oversee the project and so on. They are extremely tedious and time consuming. So although this loan was signed in March, by the end of this year, as of today, there hasn't been any significant movement. We haven't been able to contract hopefully early in the new year, this will speed up. We continue to impress upon the urgency of this project. Also, we signed a 8 million grant and 10 million loan for the ferry that is targeted for Northwest. That is moving reasonably. So we are trying to fulfill certain conditions at the moment. The $1 million grant from India for IT Center of Excellence is proceeding. The National Data Management Authority and UG building should be completed early in the new year. And the equipment and so on from India should be procured. And that center should be up and running hopefully next year. In terms of China, you already know about the Chedijago International Airport, but we will shortly sign a loan for $47 million to complete the road between Buxton and Pleasance and Belfield. Pleasance and Belfield. Yeah. So right, we've signed a framework agreement on November 23rd of this year, and the loan is with us in draft. We are going through it, and once there are no surprises in there, we'll be able to sign that loan. If not by year end, then early in the new year. And in terms of Japan, we have indicated already that we have reprogramming the balance of the Japanese aid that was intended for the private sector, and since the private sector doesn't want it, then we intend to reprogram it to purchase lamps, street lamps for lighting. That is to the value of about 1.3 million US that is left. So, in a nutshell, those are our program achievements for 26, highlights for 2017, and so I now open the floor to any questions that you may ask. Who's going to moderate this this year? Because there's several people putting up their hands, so I really don't want to moderate who put up the hand and who did what and so on.
I recognize.
I think you did put up her hand first.
Minister, based on what you've just stated about the budget, we've also seen a heightened call from the private sector to engage the government based on the budgeted measures, and also the unions have called for a meeting with the government. Are you willing to meet with the private sector as well as the unions to hear some of your issues?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is, in terms of rank, outranks me. And this was put to the Prime Minister, and he adequately represented the views of the government. It is not for me to add to that. I think he has adequately explained where that matter lies and so forth.
You detailed for us several loans that have been accessed this year. Can you give us a cumulative sum or cumulative number of how many loans have been accessed or approved in 2016? And over that same period, can you also give us how many investment or grants have been secured in both the total sum and the total number?
Yeah, we can have that as soon as this press conference is finished. My officers can give you that comfortably.
Research journals that were released. You spoke about the IMF flagging Guyana for the current expenditure being greater than capital expenditure.
No, they're not flagging it current expenditure greater than capital. What they're saying, it's outpacing, right? That's the word, outpacing capital.
So for the layperson at stock market who doesn't understand outpacing, could you elaborate?
Okay, right. What I'm saying is that if you take, for example, suppose you were to agree to a certain wage level that was inconsistency with your targets as relates to deficit, your targets as relates to your revenue collections and so forth, then you'll have to find resources from somewhere else. And that potentially could mean maybe at the expense of capital expenditure. All right? Now, investment is the lifeblood of any economy. And the private sector will tell you also the same thing. Investment is the lifeblood of business. If you don't invest, you can't grow the business. Similarly, at the national level, if you don't invest, then you can't grow the country. Current expenditure is meant to support investment. Okay? So you then can have a current expenditure, say, of $100 million and a capital expenditure of, say, $2 million. You see what I mean? And that is where we're talking about one outpacing the other. All right? There has to be a judicious balance between what we call in current expenditure and what we call in capital expenditure, which is the lifeblood of running this economy, investing in the economy.
Sir, how is the administration looking to strike that judicious balance?
Right. So essentially, during next year, we are looking in terms of how we do business. For example, where are the areas most? You do a compartmentalization of expenditure, current expenditure, and find out where the expenditure is growing faster than normal, and then you seek to put in measures in place to ensure that you pull back on those without compromising. You know what I mean? For example, people generally tend to believe that you have to give more if you want more. But without appreciating that you need to first examine what you have to determine whether you could do the same thing for less, or whether you could do the same thing for 30% more. If you see what I mean. I like using this whole concept of employment. You know, why? Because you can always talk about productivity of labor. If you start work at 8 o'clock, for example, but you having several of your staff, significant numbers of your staff, coming in between 8:30 and 9, for example, then output for that entire day will decline, especially if you're serving the public. There are only so many people you could serve because everybody will go off to lunch at their 1 o'clock, at their 12 o'clock, and so on. So if you're losing X number of hours per day by one staff and you multiply it by several staff and then you do it for a whole month, you see how much you lost, but you're paying the same salaries, if you see what I mean. So if you can improve, when you do the compartmentalization, you say, here's one area that we could improve significantly. If this work started at 8 o'clock, everybody will be here to start the work at 8. Not at 8 o'clock, you come at 8 o'clock. You will be here to start work at 8. And there'll be better supervision, so that the burden doesn't fall on one or two staff. But everybody will be doing his or her share equally in accordance with the guideline. That's why I'm using that, because the vendor could understand what I'm speaking about. If the vendor doesn't open on time, sales gone, because the person who's there since 4 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. in the morning, you pass in, you see the vendor, you say, listen, and you buy. When you saunter in at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever, you lose sales. Similarly, if you employ somebody during Christmas or say October or so on, to come and say, do your chairs, do over, as we call it, make over your chairs, okay? And this person is there all the time, comes in at 9 o'clock, comes in at 10 o'clock, doesn't come on Monday because they drink up over the weekend, and so on. So Christmas is coming and you're not seeing your chairs, So if you didn't, and one reason is because you didn't manage that process properly. You understand? So Christmas morning, you barely got some chairs that falling apart by Boxing Day. You see? I'm using those examples because I figure the vendors will appreciate it. Now all you have to do is globalize this, nationalize it, and you appreciate why we have to pay far more attention to the growth in current expenditure relative to the growth in capital expenditure. We also have to pay, even as capital expenditure is growing, we have to also pay attention to the quality of the expenditure. In our investment profile, Skeldon's $200 million investment is counted as capital expenditure. But when you do quality analysis now, it's a different story. A number of roads have been built in this country over the last 23 years. When you do quality analysis, look at the bridge at Hope. That has been counted in that year's capital expenditure. But when you have to go now and fix that, it will also again count as capital expenditure that is growing. But guess what? You're more or less static, because that is a bridge that should have lasted you for X number of years with just minimal maintenance. But because of poor implementation, you now have to go spend even more money. Similarly with the Skeldon estate, because of poor implementation and poor choices that were made, you have to spend, I don't even know, maybe, I don't know, we have spent so much already, 55 million US on that alone, that could have gone a far way to give us the road to let him, for example. If you don't, so this is two things we're talking about here. Growth and quality, okay? Growth and quality of expenditure. If we keep repeatedly have to go back and fix what should have lasted you for X number of years, then you're only having growth in capital expenditure, but you're not having growth in overall stock of the country's capital.
Sir, my final question. I hope that you can provide a sort of numeric value of the outpacing current capital. And also, I want to know if it is well, the IMF is an agency of conditional lending. I want to know if it is that this outpace would in any way affect our ability to access IMF funding.
No, well, we don't need to access IMF funding right now. IMF, International Monetary Fund, is an international organization that first and foremost looks at global surveillance. They're not a development lending institution like, say, IDB and so on. They are a lender, if you want, of last resort when you have balance of payments and other problems. So we have no need to go to IMF for lending right now. But we do have need, in accordance with Article 4, for consultations to take place yearly. Okay? And they will come and they will look at every aspect of the economy. And they will flag things. Right? They may flag overvalued exchange rate. You know, for example, they may say, well, look, this rate relative to your competitiveness, export and so on is overvalued. Okay? And therefore you may have to do such adjustments. If your exchange rate is fixed, as in the case of Barbados, they are tied at 2-to-1, fixed exchange rate, then they may have to devalue. Guyana at one time was also tied, then you may have to devalue. If your rate is floating, then you have to do such things as to allow the rate to freely float, rather than doing other things to just maintain that rate, as we see. And they will look at your trade regime, and they may say, listen, you have a number of restrictions there that are impeding trade flow. So they may ask you to look at that and remove those restrictions, whether artificial or otherwise. You know, and any other area, wages, they will talk about wages, growth in wages, whether it's growing too fast, whether the economy is overheating, thus will cause inflation. So they have that global perspective, and they will come every year and they will give you a report. Now, even though you don't have an IMF program, and many of us don't want one anyhow, other agencies look to your credit score, so to speak, coming out from the IMF, to be able to determine whether they will lend to you. Okay? So, although you're not in a fund program, you still want a good credit score from the IMF to allow other donors, development partners, to be able to continue lending to you. Because they will not want to lend to you if you don't have this favorable score. They may lend, but they may put in additional conditions and so on. So it's vitally important, even if you're not in an IMF program, for you to be managing your economy in a way as if you were in a program, so to speak, but without the harshness of an IMF program or so. I don't know if you...
Oh, yeah. Another question.
Your wage bill was hiked substantially. In addition to the pay increase, you gave the $25,000 bill. I got $25,000.
I ain't getting no $25,000 bill.
Plus, you had already made some pay increases and all this. So what impact has that had on your budget?
Go ahead, good.
All right, and when you're on that, it would be interesting for you to state the efforts your ministry is making to recover advances paid to contractors who did no work at all and they owe you millions of dollars.
Okay, all right. The second one, I'll ask my accountant general who's here. By the way, I'm sorry I didn't introduce my my senior staff. The accountant general, who I understand will not be with us for much longer, Mr. Jawar Prasad, Mr. Tarcham Bagabin, who's the head of the Project Cycle Management Division, Of course, the Finance Secretary, Dr. Hector Butts, my budget director, Ms. Sonia Rupnath, my IT specialist, Ms. Farnham, so our consultant specialist, valuation, Mr. Barrington, who's the acting head of the valuation department, and Ms. Louise Boye, who's the deputy finance secretary. Yes, I think I've got everybody. Yes, okay. As you know, there have been a big struggle over the wages front. And I don't really want to see much because I seem to scratch the wrong side of certain people. Although it's very clear what I'm saying. Nothing can be paid. Nothing can be paid unless you can, A, find the means of paying it, and 2, find the means of sustaining it. Okay? That's why I can pay you a $25,000 bonus this year because it's one-off and I can sustain it. And I don't have to sustain it, I'm sorry. I don't have to sustain it. Similarly, last year I could pay you $50,000 a bonus because, again, it was one-off and I don't have to sustain it. Whenever you pay wages, regardless of how much you pay, it has to be a process where you have crunched the numbers, as they say, and you've come up with possibilities. At this lower end, this is the max I can do. At this higher end, this is the max I can do. And our strategic approach will be to negotiate around that. Okay? We have the numbers. I'm not saying our partners don't have numbers, but if you were to even do a quick analysis of some of the numbers that have been thrown out, you realize very early that these numbers don't lend itself in the context of the economy that we are carrying, to thing. I think it was Mr. Vishnu Durga, who is part of the private sector, who had made a telling statement, and I think he was chastised also by the unions and so on. He said, I must be a magician to be paying those kinds of increases relative to the downturn in the economy. And he said the private sector would have done so. But it's true. I mean, of course, private sector are more private interests. Government is more social interests and so on. Yet we have been able to come up with configurations that will allow us to still stay within the ballpark that we can generate and sustain over time. Because every time you add something to the wage bill, it has to be sustained. You can't go back and cut it next year and say, well, look, things didn't work out. If there are revenue shortfalls, there's no such thing as going and cut wages. You have to continue paying what you would have agreed to pay. So one has to also look down the road to see what is possible before you can even end up agreeing to a number today. Revenues can only grow so much. So we have to grow the economy, continue to grow the economy to continue to get bigger and better revenues. And secondly, I'm on record of saying that this government would like to reduce tax rates over time. We have started this year, right? We have started this year, and we would like to continue this trend, providing that two things happen. We are in a position to broaden the base on which we are taxing, and also to make certain that the economy continues to grow. These are not conflicting priorities. They go in tandem, okay? Our economy grows once it can be helped by a tax regime that is supportive. And no tax regime that imposes higher taxes will be deemed to be supportive to a growing economy. So we have to have an outlook that suggests lower and lower taxes, but a broadening of that base. And the broadening of that base includes heavily bringing people into the net who are there, who are not in the net, and also those who are in the net to ensure that they are playing fair with the tax system. So that is essentially thing. Now, I know you're going to get tomorrow how Guyana again and so on, but that is the role of the Minister of Finance, essentially, to put it out there to let people understand and appreciate that it's not a case where we have a VAT, old-time VAT, by the way, with money where you could just turn it on and you get water and it's refilled by rain, the two things that you put into the vat. So water is continuously coming in and you could take it out, turn on the pipe and have it there. There's no such, we don't have that luxury here at the ministry, and no country, even Saudi Arabia, where they have good money. I was reading just the other day where they are cutting back. They're cutting back on certain things that they were giving out to their population and so forth. So even there, where they have massive reserves of money, you have to always manage your economy prudently, because Mr. Inflation will eat it up, or you will find yourself in that strange situation where you can't sustain and you just can't cut people's salary once you would have given it, right? Wages, prices, they're all very sticky. They're what we call sticky downwards. In other words, then, once you put it there, there's no going back down about it. Yes, yeah, the advances, yes.
Yeah, first of all, advances to contractors are severely restricted. That is because of the control mechanism we want to put in place, just to avoid this overspending that you would already or the general talking about. What we've done, advances to contractors are more bonded, in that you have to lodge some form of security before that is considered. In addition to that, before you reach to actually getting an advance, it has to be clear that we have to be satisfied at the Ministry of Finance that you are on the ball in terms of delivering. So, one, the advances are severely restricted, and two, if advances are given, they are bonded.
So, sorry. According to the Auditor General, though, there were millions of dollars, 200 million, a lot of millions of dollars to some contractors who've done no work. One contractor with, I think, $134 million or something inside, and efforts were to be made to collect, decided to levy on his property to work. I want to know how that's going.
One of the controls we have in place is the FSS meeting, where we meet with the permanent secretaries, and when they have these problems where contractors are given advances, we look across the spectrum of permanent secretaries, and if they have this problem, we invariably would levy on these contractors because they would have projects in several ministries, departments, and agencies. And so we would hold on them to ensure that they repay their advances or they deliver on the work to be done.
So, look,
Minister, just two topics. Could you speak to the performance of state-owned enterprises? What has been the collective impact on the economy where these are concerned? And could you say which of these entities are actually posing to be a strain on the national person? What has been their contribution to the national person?
Well, I could answer the last one first, because it is known that of all the state-owned entities, Gaisuku has been a strain. Yeah, I like the word strain on the government's coffers. As you know, between when we came in May and up to the end of this year, we have shelled out $23 billion into Gaisuku, and I keep reminding that this is not counting the debt that we have to meet on behalf of Gaisuku when they should have been giving us the money to repay the loans, particularly in relation to Skeldon Estate. You know, so you have a dead investment in Skeldon. It's producing little or nothing. Its future is pretty dark, and therefore it cannot generate the income to give us to help repay the loans that were taken to build that factory. In addition to that, now you have a situation where Gaisuku is in the untenable position of not being able to meet its own wage bill. So that is why I believe the Prime Minister was, he had used a good, I think it's a metaphor I think he had used, that pouring money into Gaisuku was like pouring it down a black hole, because if you couldn't even meet your own wage bill, employment costs, then the transfers that we are making to Gaisuku is not then really adding value to Gaisuku, because it's just going to pay wages or to help meet the payment of wages. Now, that's a I won't want to say unheard of situation, but that's a reality as it relates to Gaisuku. The other troublemaker was the Guyana Power and Light. However, they have benefited over the last year and a half to two from low oil prices and some efficiency gains that allowed them to recover somewhat in terms of their bottom line. And as a result, they have been able to make some payments of interest on some of the loans that we had on lent to them in the past. I think they made 500 million. 500 million. Are they required to make another 5? They're budgeted to make 1 billion transfer, which is glory hallelujah. It's a real turnaround from where we had to be giving them transfers to one now where they are retransferring. We don't know how long this will continue, but we are praying for the best. Oil prices are expected on average to be higher this year than last year, but we are hoping that that prediction, even though we use it in the budget, we are hoping that it will be less than we have averaged, the average that we had assumed. The other, in all this so-called gloomy thing, I think we should mention Guyana, which has been performing reasonably well. I don't want to use any other adjective than that, simply because that they have benefited somewhat from price increases over time in the oil, and that have been passed through. They have been able to make dividend payments, pretty good dividend payments. I think last year they did 2 billion, which came in very handy. This year they are expected to make another 1 billion, right, which will come in handy also. And also they are showing their worth. You see, you need agencies like Guyana to really give effect to policies of the government as it relates to pass-through. We have this great problem, I've been at it for any number of press conferences, that take the VAT lowering. People come and say to us now, Minister, how we can get this passed through? But I am saying I have done my part. Now the consumers and the press and everybody else need to do their part, which is to indicate why you aren't having lower prices with this reduction in the VAT. Okay? Why, if I exempt X product, it can't pass through? And I've told you before, you don't have to take my word for it, you would have seen what happened in 2015 when we took off the VAT on so many different items, yet there wasn't any pass through to the poor person. But people, knowledgeable enough, use the poor in this manner to get these items to become VAT-free, so that they can continue charging the same price as if they were a VAT still in place. And they are the beneficiaries, not poor people. So you need the Gaia oils of this world, that when we give a cut in a tariff or so on, they will immediately pass it through. So their lowered prices have to be matched by their competitors. And that's the only way it passes through. That's the only way to pass through. Other way, of course, is for we to VAT those things, as indeed some people are now telling us, why don't we just VAT everything at a lower rate and have programs in place that will attack the poor. At a personal level, this has nothing to do with the coalition government, at a personal level, this would be my favored approach. And it will free GRA staff to have to be worrying about refunds and all these kinds of stories, and concentrate more of its staff in going after the people who are not paying the VAT and so on, right? But we have such a society that still believes that when you VAT-free bread or you VAT-free chow mein and so on, the poor people will benefit. Well, the first thing is, why should a rich person who can pay the VAT on chow mein not pay the VAT on chow mein? Why shouldn't they? But you can't say, rich people, you will pay the VAT, poor people, you will not pay the VAT. We don't have such a system that can be put in place. So it's either VATable or exempt. And those who have the money, they can buy chow mein. The poor person who could hardly even see a slice of bread will just watch chow mein, even though it's VAT-free. So these are some, to my mind, some of the more intriguing policy questions that, to me, I think the press should help in putting out there. They don't have to think, but just to stimulate people's attention and bring them around to a different argument as it relates to pricing, formation of prices, taxes, and all these different areas. Yes.
Just two last questions. Sir, the IMF made a recommendation in its last report that government should start to reduce its bailout to the sugar sector. Would you say that government's actions were in keeping with this particular recommendation?
I would say, based on the amount that we have in the 2017 budget, that we're getting somewhere. When we started in 2015, we started with 12 billion. 2016, 11 billion. 2017, we have there 9 billion. So there's a process of reduction that is taking place. I dare say, for as long as Gaisuko exists, in whatever shape or form, there will have to be a process of transfers until it can be brought into a state. It is what we call too big to fail kind of argument. It's like the old, what Obama had to do with Ford Motors, albeit it was a far shorter period. But all the whole romanticism about slavery and how we reach here and sugar and all these things, it's too big to fail, and it has too much history in it to just be abandoned, so to speak. And it's a considerable part of the economy, both in terms of GDP, both in terms of employment, even foreign exchange earnings, and so on. So, but what we are going to be saying, and what I'm saying now, is that those transfers will have to be targeted to a substantial improvement in Gaisuko. They can't continue to be targeted in the black hole concept that the Prime Minister had used. And yes, any structural adjustment of the kind that has to take place in Gaisuko is going to be extremely painful. It's going to be, all you can do is ease the pain and hope that the measures that you are putting in place will yield fruits earlier than you perhaps project. A number of areas in Guyana have gone through that pain before. When manganese was scrapped in Northwest, and up to this day, you can see what has happened to the Northwest when manganese was the only real activity that was going on. Bauxite in Linden, same thing. You see what happened. Gold came in a bit and saved some of the people and so on, but that tongue has never really been the same as when bauxite flourished in those days. And, of course, lucky with sugar is that there are a lot of agricultural lands there, that can plant different things and so on. When you enter mining, you can't plant anything or switch from bauxite into, something else and so on. So I think that is where this conversation is going. I think Simon.
Sir, Sir McCallum from Gina, you mentioned something about a barring committee. Could you
debarring.
Debarring.
Debarring committee. Yeah, I think it's provided for in the act, and it is meant to debar firms and individuals who have been non-compliant or run afoul of the Procurement Act. Mm.
Okay, yes.
Minister, you mentioned earlier about your vision to have taxes reduced but to go on the base. Could you expand on this? Like, what areas would you like to extend taxes?
No. I think you got me wrong. Not like extend taxes to. When I talk about broadening the base, right? I mean in a number of areas. One, those who are out of the net, like everybody says self-employed is hard to tax. Okay, whether it be doctors, accountants, engineers, lawyers, of course, and so on. And that is a significant group in Guyana. So if we don't have the wherewithal to tax them, then, but at the same time you have to spend, and they are enjoying all the good public services that we do, whether it's roads and so on, but yet they're not paying their fair share taxes, then we have to tax me and you, whose taxes come out at the PAYE level. But if we can broaden the base that include 99%, if not 100% of all the professionals, and you got lots of them, people don't seem to understand. Taxes aren't meant to only be paid to those who they claim stupid enough to pay. Taxes are meant to be paid by everybody. And once we segment to those who are paying relative to those who are not paying, then unfortunately those who are paying will bear the brunt, and that brunt will be in the form of a high tax rate. So now if we can broaden this base to include all these people who are not paying, plus those who are paying but cheating, we're doing 3 jobs, but we only submitting income tax returns for one, and so on. If we could get that base broader, then rates can progressively come down to what you call manageable rates. I see the private sector commission calling for 20%, but they were wise enough to say over 10 years. They were wise enough to say, I would like to do it even shorter. But you can only do that if the economy continues to grow, and if we can, and in that growing economy, we continue to get the base broadened. You got a number of companies. I think in the last, I don't know if you were there, the GRA, were you there at the GRA's press conference? It's astonishing. 32,000 businesses in this country are unregistered. 32,000. That is an astonishing figure. I was hoping that he made an error. Maybe 3,200, maybe 320. But yes, 32,000 businesses are unregistered, doing businesses here, but probably not paying taxes. You understand? And then, of course, another admission was that the GRA tended to focus heavily on Georgetown. But they got significant activity going on outside of Georgetown. To such an extent now that he's moving to put in a port at Morowana, and I think 2 other places. Just to trap, he's talking about billions of dollars in taxes that are leaking in those areas. So that's what I meant by broadening that. Not about putting any more taxes on any different places. It's about lowering taxes on a broader base, so to speak.
Okay, Krishna, one more question. You mentioned also about not finding enough money to sustain payments, like an increase to the wages, public servants' salaries. For those disgruntled public servants who didn't get an increase this year, how would you justify finding money to sustain an increase in minister's salary, and also finding money to introduce the anti-pension bill? And also you have to continually and plus annually to
Okay, well, let's deal with the last one first. I think it's so unfair to carry that line of thinking and propaganda. Look, the Prime Minister, Hamilton Green was a Prime Minister. Under the existing law that is there, it says that, well, the original law, if you remember my winding up, the original law says presidents and prime ministers' pension shall be 7/8, right, of their annual salary, the highest annual salary, 7/8. Okay? Ex-President Jagdeo, in 2004, took out the president from that bill, from the act, which was the President and Prime Minister's Act, and left prime ministers. And now the presidents now are entitled to 7/8 of the current president and or his successors. So they will always get 7/8 of whatever is the existing president. Now poor, yes, it's tied. So whenever the president's salary move up, Mr. Jagdeo's pension is moving up automatically. Automatically moving up. Because it's 7/8 of the president's pension. Now this argument, this thing is not about Hamilton Green. It's about whether Hamilton Green is entitled to 7/8 of the Prime Minister's salary. Straightforward. You know, it has nothing to do, and the reason why it's named Hamilton Green, because when Mr. Hamilton Green goes, this bill is dead. Why? Because every Prime Minister from Mr. Nagamutu going forward will get 7/8 of his salary. So if Mr. Prime Minister Nagamutu or for some reason says, I demit office, for some reason, he will get 7/8 of his salary, which right now I think is 1.7. So he will get 7/8 of 1.7 million. So it has nothing to do, please, you know, I like the evening news, you know, but please, don't carry the propaganda. Oh, poor Mr. Hampton Green.
I'm just asking for a comparison.
No, well, what I'm saying, because I've seen it before. I've seen it several times before on evening news and in Guyana Times and all this kind of thing. Carrying out a personal line to Mr. Hampton Green has nothing to do with Mr. Hampton Green. The man was a prime minister for 5+ years. Okay? He was a prime minister for 5+ years. And I've not seen this line carried to, say, Mr. Sam Hines, who was only a president for 9 months. 9 months he was a president for. You know what pension he gets? Not the pension that he was for 20-something years as prime minister. He gets 7/8 of Mr. Granger's present salary for being president for only 9 months. Nobody's complaining about it. So I'm sorry, but you did ask some questions before. Sustainability. Listen, 50% was paid in June 2015 to about 8 ministers, I think 8, because the percentages vary. There again, you know, you have this 50% mantra, right? It varied from a low, was it 6% or 5% increase to Mr. Nagamutu? 4.7% to Mr. Nagamutu, to 50% to the senior ministers and three vice presidents. Eight senior ministers, is it 8 or 10 or 12 senior ministers and 3 vice presidents? Now, if you really want to compare percentages, then fine. If you want to compare absolute amounts, then the entire increase, ranging from 4.7% to Mr. Nagamutu to 50% for a couple of ministers, was $65 million annually. $65 million annually. You know what's the bill? You know what's the bill for the 1 to 10 increase that we paid this year? I mean, if you really want to, 1 to 10% increase. What's the increase behind? A couple $1 billion, right? Couple $1 billion. She can give you the figure after we leave this thing. So yes, if you want to say percentage, hey, I can't deny, but it was a range from 4.7 to up to 50. And it was paid to a couple of people relative to the public service. Now, ministers have not enjoyed any subsequent increase. Okay? We have not enjoyed any subsequent increase. Okay? So we'll be going through from 2015 to 2017 with just that increase. Okay? And I don't see us, unless things change, getting one in a hurry. During the same period, you can do the quick maths. We have moved the minimum wage from $39,520 to 55,000. Now check the increase and see. Check the increase and see. And if we really want to get numbers crunching, let's crunch numbers. Let's crunch numbers. The ex-president increased his salary from 200 something thousand in 2006 to 1.3 million by 2011. That's a 500% increase. During the same period, the minimum wage was increased by 37.5%. Let's talk numbers. 37.5%. Would you print that tomorrow in your papers? Hopefully I'm going to be looking.
I don't have editorial.
Oh, okay. There you go. But luckily this is going out live, so it will be printed by somebody else. No, let's talk numbers, because we seem to personalize some of these things. Not you, but we seem sometimes to personalize some of these things in ways that are unhelpful.
In that regard, I have another question.
Sure.
Why is it when criticisms are thrown against the government in defense would use PPP's administration as a benchmark when they're trying to justify what this is?
Well, no, we use two benchmarks. One, you use the PPP because that's the only recent benchmark you could have. They, of course, using, by the way, when the people want to criticism, they use a benchmark going way back to prior to 1992. And secondly, you use a benchmark that is either internationally best practice or Caribbean best practice. I think when it comes to increases of salaries for judges, you know, there are a number of categories of different people who are earning over $1 million right now, who have already submitted claims that the money is too low. I'm not going to identify any categories, but we have in our possession people who are earning over $1 million who have said to us the salary is too low. You know? And I don't know about criticism. You all know I work very hard. I couldn't care less and so on. I mean, the money they're paying me is not even the money that the Barjagdo government used to pay me. And you can find out for me and he will tell you. The money that they pay me as a minister is not even anywhere near the money that the Barjagdo government used to pay me as an advisor. So I don't know when you talk about you take 50% and so on and so forth, thing. Everything has to be put in context. At the end of the day, though, I think what we need is a salaries review commission that can deal with offices like legislature, people in the legislature, people in the judiciary, because these are always going to be contentious areas. And I think, like in Trinidad, and I believe in Jamaica, and I think in Barbados also, what we could have is a permanent salary review commission that looks at salary maybe on a triennial basis or something like that, rather than it being rather than it being a part of the executive. You know, we could just have, say, a commission out there, right? Some well-known commission that will look at this here, so, and make recommendations as to adjustments in salary and so on. And to me, hopefully some of the heat will be taken off from any subsequent.
So just two quick areas. Do you foresee Guyana having or attaining a resilient economy by 2020? And
Well, on that one, it depends on what you mean by resilient. I don't foresee Guyana's economy being in that word resilient by 2020. We have to set the groundwork. Remember, sugar is still a major aspect of Guyana economy, and unless we are prepared to move away from sugar as we know it into value added and take opportunities that are available, for example, even in CARICOM market, but more particularly in Brazil. Once we could get a road going there, there's a market there for sugar, there's a market there for rice, and all this kind of thing. To get the resilience, which means that it can withstand shocks and so on, we have to move away from primary production into the next stage in the value chain, and then into the next stage of the value chain, and we also have to put in place climate resilient infrastructure, practices, climate resilient practices, technology, and all these things have to be put in place. We just would not move from 50 years of doing the same thing into any climate. We throw around that word too easily. But to get to a climate resilient, to get to a resilient economy that is sturdy, it has to be diversified. In our case, it also has to be green, and it has to be able to withstand shocks that seem to be ever present when you're producing just primary commodities. In Guyana's case, for example, you take sugar. Even if we were able to produce all the sugar right now, we'll have a difficulty because we don't have a captive market anymore, and we have to go out there and hustle like everybody else. And at no time, certainly in the post-independence period, were we able to produce sugar at a price that could have competed with on the international market. We always had to add some protection somewhere along the line. In Guyana's case, we had a long protection under the European Union artificial price that allowed us to stay in sugar for that length of time. So in a sense, maybe it was a good and a bad thing. The bad thing in the sense that were we forced to adjust using international prices as our benchmark, then who knows, we might have been a different sugar entity today. Rice, same thing. We just producing rice in the main just to sell in bulk and so on. We need to get involved into rice, packaging rice, specialty rice, Rice Krispies, rice this, rice pops, all these different things that we see overseas. And now it's going to be a hard sell because who is going to use rice pops coming out of Anna Regina versus rice pop coming out of New York or one of the other places with a fancy cover on it? Who's going to do that now? But I mean, a couple of years ago when we were attempting it, it was deemed to be bad. So, but now they're finding out that things like flour. I mean, look, Barbados. Somebody brought me a bread. Oh, he's our ambassador to Switzerland now. But at that time he was at ECO. And he bought me a bread that he purchased in Barbados. Cassava flour. Up to 30% cassava flour. Blended with wheat flour. And he brought me this bread. He says, as soon as it hits the shelves in Barbados, it's sold out. It's sold out. And trust me, the bread tastes wonderful. Wonderful. And we here in agricultural country, to even just tell somebody that, friend, the bread got in cassava flour, oh, I want it. Cassava bread, which is a rich thing, we could go nicely with pepper pot. How many people you see on Christmas, they're going to be eating cassava bread with pepper pot, which is really and truly how to enjoy. You see, how to enjoy thing. But no, we even got bread coming in from New York and all them bags that Dynamic got left in New York. Got bread and so on, and it coming full steam. Coming full steam for us, Well, no, though the turkey and the ham don't spoil. So from what here, the turkey and the ham don't spoil. So you gotta go again.
With regard to NISIL, even though there's some changes that have been made with this entity, there's still criticisms by some that it's still shrouded in secrecy. There was a new board that was put in place, but no press conference held, which you spoke to in your opening. So, is this something that you're going to urge NISIL to hold a press conference to speak on some of the changes?
No, I'm going to urge them to be more open because there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide at NISIL beyond the fact that they're not as rich as they used to be. But there's nothing really to hide at NISIL. Their transactions are fairly transparent and open. And I think they have been able to get a new CEO who is going to be recruited very early in the new year. Called Mr. James. This is James? Horace James, isn't it? Horace James was only interim, but I don't think he is the new CEO designate. They have a new CEO and so on. So let's hope in the context of new that they will be bringing, in addition to dynamism and vitality, will be bringing new approaches to management, essentially. There's nothing to transfer. They think to transfer. In fact, they need lots of money because remember they are they are agents for certain agencies, plus their holding company. AHI is a holding company for Marriott, and Nistel is the holding company for AHI. So they're trust me, they have anything to transport to me. And that in any case, it is business unusual, right? They are now only required at the level of dividends, for example. They only hold it in accordance with what was the original intent, and then they'll transfer in full, the dividends and so on to me. So, yeah, like I said, there's nothing that NISEL has to hide. There's nothing being kept there. I think what they have is a very conservative board and management who like to stay away from the public and do things quietly, essentially. But trust me, they're not hiding anything. But I'm going to talk to them about holding a press conference maybe early in the new year. So. All right. Yes. Oh, go ahead. Huh? Who? No, you can't pose no questions to the station. Station had his GRA thing. This is my press conference.
I recognize.
All right, sir. Minister Patterson of the National Assembly said that Research Development Inc. had met with you just a couple days before the budget to discuss monies owed to persons who have been working on the project. Sir, the $500 million allocated in 2017 for HDI, sir, is that money enough? Because when you look at the list of creditors...
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, any match will tell you how much is owed.
If the money is enough.
No, put it this way. No, I think the money that is owed is roughly about $798 million, based on the list that had been submitted. I think it's about 798. Give or take a few million, right? Which we're not going to quarrel about. The government indicated that it can only accommodate 500 million as a full and final settlement. As a full and final settlement, okay? So what that means is that HDI will have to make some apportionment, okay? Some apportionment relative to the debts owed. Now, this is a take it or leave it situation. So if you are owed $2 million by HDI, and it works out that because of only this amount here, you could only get 1.2, then you could either accept the 1.2 as a full and final settlement, or you could sue HDI. Why are you laughing? That is the reality. That is what we said. We can only accommodate 500 million as a full and final. So you don't have to take, you could sue HDI for the amount that is owing by HDI to you.
Sir, how does that work considering the basis of the company and considering that the Minister of Government sits on the board?
Well, I don't know, you gone off in a tangent now. You asked me a question that I could answer.
Okay.
You asked me a question that I could answer. I given you additional details, right? Because those would have been simple addition. You asked me whether 500 is enough. I told you it has to be enough as a full and final settlement. And you have a choice. You can refuse to accept it and go to court and sue HDI, or you can accept it as a full and final settlement. No, I don't want to answer any more questions on HDI. This is a Ministry of Finance thing. You asked me a question, I answered it.
Oh, Ministry of Finance, sir. Yesterday, your government, with a finger pointed at you.
I would like our to be a better adjective pronoun rather than your.
You see, I got to be new for that guy there, like if I was.
No, I said I would have rather. I didn't say you have to.
You see, if I said, if I said, oh, you're putting me in a fix.
Yes. What fingers are pointing to me? Which is, seem to be happy our days these days.
Yeah, that the budget is designed in such a way to assist cronies and friends of and friends of the government, and that it continues to signal an attempt to victimize those not seen as friends of the government.
Well, I don't even know. I mean, that is such a ludicrous thing to say. I think in the winding up of the debate, I made reference to the fact that I saw the list of contractors who were awarded jobs in 2016 up to, I believe, the end of October. And when you see that list, if it ever was made, well, it should be made public. It's just that the compilation has been done. But if you were just do a quick compiling of your list based on the announcements that have been made over time, you will find a number of these, a large number on that list, could not profess to have been supporters of the coalition. You know, and the reason being, and oh, by the way, and this is, you would not have failed to have heard of the numerous accusations made of the coalition by its supporters that nothing, the thing hasn't changed. They are not getting jobs. It looked like only the favored ones from the PPP getting jobs, and all these accusations that have been made, right? But what we have started to do in the context of the Central Tender Board is to be open and transparent, okay? Now, unfortunately, a number of our supporters who had been denied jobs in 23 years might have lost the capacity, you know, and have to rebuild, you know. It's a learning curve again for them because the obstacles had been put in there. Trying to break into a market got many barriers, okay? And for them, one of the barriers is they don't have the money, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the skill set, you know, and so on. They cannot turn up to a bank and get no bond for $100 million to start doing works, and so on. And based on some of the criteria, they will never get anywhere near some of those jobs, like sea defense, for example, where you can't take chances, and so on. They will never get anywhere near. They have lost that skill set. Now you have to rebuild brick by brick. Unfortunately, but they are impatient, rightly so, because money is not flowing to them. Money is not flowing to them. So when you read those things, first of all, I don't read them. I don't listen to them, because I know it's outright propaganda, and that's for our propaganda department to deal with. It's not for me to deal with, because I know what they're saying is not true. They know it's not true, but it's good, it makes good sense to the segment of the population that they will appeal to. It makes sense to them, you know, even though they themselves probably know it's not true, because they have been beneficiaries of large chunks of the public sector investment. Not only public sector investment. Let me say something. I was shocked a couple of weeks ago to see that the list of tenderers, to supply, I believe, the Georgetown Hospital with food, 4 of the 5 were construction companies. Four of the 5 who bid to supply Georgetown Hospital with food were construction companies. No, and I think 2 or 3 of them were well-known construction companies. Were well-known. So well, exactly. You know, so you know, I mean, it's not to knock them or any sort of thing, but why would supplying food to Georgetown Hospital attract the attention of 4 out of 5 construction companies, as opposed to regular food places and so on? But that's the nature of the game. And I think it was awarded to one of them, one of the construction companies. It's the nature of the game. We need, everybody needs to up their game when it comes. It's no longer we could go in a back room or a room in Rap Street and say, man, looks, you can get the thing, just put in a bid, and so on. It's no longer that happens. It's open, the press is invited, you sit down there, the bids are announced, the objections are there, and so on. You know, so as I said to our support and so on, they need assistance to be able to bid in a manner that will allow them to do bids and so on. And we have to recognize that they have lost capacity in that 20 years when they were shut out from the bidding process, and we have to come back slowly. We can't come back in a full rush. I mean, that is understandably the nature of things, and I think once they appreciate that hopefully that down the road they can get bigger jobs as they regain the experience and so on. All right? Okay. Thank you very much. Before you go, well, of course, never let it be said that you came to Ministry of Finance and you were not treated to some ginger beer and so on. I just want, I know you didn't ask about the free balance and the IFMAS. I just want to ask Mr. Tony Farnham to give you a 2-minute update on where we are with the IFMAS. Just come here.
Okay, as you know, we are in the process of, we signed a contract to upgrade the IFMAS system to make it more modern and more responsive to our needs. We have been meeting with Rebalance up to last week, before the last, because there were some delays in the schedule. So the new schedule has the implementation happening in June, finalized in June of 2017. In time, hopefully, to help with the new budget preparation in 2017, and to meet a lot of the shortcomings of the existing system, which the Accountant General has well documented. There are significant shortcomings of the existing system, and when we upgrade, we will seek to address some, but not all of those shortcomings. But we are also in another process of looking for other solutions to strengthen what we call the Integrated Financial Management Information System. Okay? So June 2017 is looking at the accounting side and some of the budgeting aspects. But going forward to 2018, we're looking at the whole integrated financial management system.
Okay? Okay. Well, once again, thanks. Thank you to the press. Look forward to engagements in 2017. And all the best for the new year and Christmas.